Ambassador Sager, thank you so much for coming to the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm glad that we're going to have a few minutes to talk a little bit about the Swiss economy and the bilateral relationship between the United States and Switzerland. To get us started, can you tell me a little bit about your mission's goals while you're here in Washington?
Switzerland and the United States face a lot of the same challenges, both domestically and internationally, from the environment to energy efficiency to security issues, migration, education, demography. And I do believe that for all the differences in the way we try to grapple with these challenges, there's a lot we can learn from each other. And so one of my main goals, other than dealing with day-to-day issues that may come up, day-to-day differences, one of my main goals is to foster a debate, to see in which way we can learn from each other, from our experiences, from our knowledge in these various areas. And so we're working with think tanks, we're working with, of course, the administration, with people from Capitol Hill, staffers, and apart from trying to increase the dialogue between Switzerland and the United States, it builds relationships personally, professionally, and institutionally.
And we're fortunate to enjoy such fantastic relationships between our two countries. I'd like to ask you a quick question about neutrality. Switzerland has a long-standing policy of neutrality. I believe it was 2002 when Switzerland joined the UN. I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit about what led to the neutrality policy.
If you look at European history and if you look at the wars, particularly between Germany and France over the centuries on the one hand, and if you look at the way Switzerland is made up of a strong German-speaking part and a strong French-speaking part, we always had the risk of being sucked into these conflicts between the major powers in Europe. So neutrality for Switzerland was always more a matter of national cohesion and survival, rather than an indifference to the conflicts of this world.
Is the neutrality policy at all related to the decision not to join the Eurozone?
It is an element. It's probably not the strongest element. In the case of UN accession or membership, which you mentioned before, their neutrality played a bigger part. I think in the case of the European Union, which of course would be membership in the European Union, which of course would be a precondition for accepting the euro as our currency, the situation is a little bit different. There it's more economic reasons, it's questions of independence, not least of all in terms of monetary policy. There is a price for that, which is fluctuations of our currency. As you know, the Swiss franc currently is very high, which makes it a little more difficult for our export industry. But it is something that we, as a nation, at least for the time being, would like to maintain.
What are your primary exports to the United States?
Our primary exports are pharmaceuticals, diagnostic equipment. That's almost a third of our exports to the United States is pharmaceuticals, diagnostic equipment, but then also fine tools, jewelry, watches, and heavy machinery.
And in terms of imports from the United States, what are the main sectors there that you're bringing goods into Switzerland?
Interestingly, they're very much the same.
Luxury, high-end.
Yes, exactly.
Goods.
Right.
You know, being a relatively small country, you must be bringing in raw materials. What sort of materials are you bringing in, and where are they coming from?
We are bringing in pretty much everything. Other than water, our only natural resource is brainpower. And so our economy is very much based on the value that we add to whatever we import and then re-export. As we always say, every other franc is earned abroad, which means that we are a heavily export-based economy. So we rely on importing goods relatively cheaply, add value, and re-export them.
Now you mentioned the high value of the franc, and we're all very aware of the global economic downturn. that's been taking place over the past several years. How has that affected the Swiss economy, but also trade with the United States?
In 2009, our economy did contract by almost 2%, like everybody else's. And particularly our financial services industry and our export industry was heavily affected, simply because our export markets had also collapsed. Fortunately, that was relatively short-lived, this downturn. In 2010, we experienced 2.6% growth, which is high for Switzerland. And also our trade relations with the United States have increased again. So we're very much looking at re-established, healthy trade relationships with the United States. So, the United States is our second largest export market after Germany.
On the topic of international trade, what are your largest trading partners?
Traditionally, Germany has always been our most important trading partner, and that's the situation the way it is still today. Followed by the United States. The United States is our second most important export partner. And because we have a relatively diversified export base all over the world, we have been less affected, I would say, by the economic downturn, by the economic crisis than some other countries in a comparable situation, because we do have export markets in Asia, in Latin America, in emerging markets, where the growth rate was relatively stable even during the economic crisis.
I know I've read that Switzerland has among the highest GDP of any country in the world. First, I would ask you, is that the case? And if so, what circumstances led to that?
As always, there's many factors that are at play. One certainly is that we, on the face of it, that may seem a disadvantage, but in the long run, it may have worked to our advantage that we don't have natural resources, and that we were, from very early on, we were forced, if you will, to develop our brain power. Switzerland today has the highest amounts of Nobel Prizes per capita in the world, and that is, I think, is largely thanks to our educational system, which produces highly skilled workforce. And since we don't have natural resources, our economy is based on the value that we add to goods that we import. And we can only do that if we have highly skilled and highly trained people. And I think that is I would say, the secret of our success.
Now, Switzerland is considered one of the greenest countries in the world in terms of energy efficiency. Can you talk to us a bit about how that came about?
Energy is very expensive in Switzerland. It's about 50% more expensive than here in the United States, and which is a great incentive to be energy efficient. We use per capita about half as much energy as the United States does, and so it's driven partly by the lack of natural resources, the lack of energy resources that we have. We just had to be more efficient, more energy efficient than others. The other factor that our relatively high consciousness of all things environmental is also due to the fact that we are a densely populated country. In other words, whenever you dump something, it's garbage, it's likely to end up on somebody else's property. And they don't like that, so we are world champions in recycling. We use all of our waste is actually used for energy production.
Here in the United States, green technology is a very hot topic. Numerous companies are investing in R&D. Does Switzerland have a robust green technology sector?
40% of energy is actually used for buildings. And we have, in Switzerland, we had discovered that early on. And about 25 years ago, we started with this, what we call Minergy standard, energy efficiency standard. And today, about 25% of all new buildings are built according to this highly energy efficient standard. And so we have been able to reduce our energy consumption considerably. The other factor, of course, is transportation. And there too, because of our efficient rail system, our efficient public transportation system, we have been able to cut our energy consumption, our total energy consumption considerably. We could probably do more in terms of renewable energy. The only renewable resource that we have is water. We could probably do more in terms of wind energy, solar energy, but I'm confident that is also coming in Switzerland over time.
And do you find, or do you believe that these technologies will be exportable in the coming years? The green energy technology?
I do believe so. I do believe that in fact, I know that there are Swiss companies that are involved in projects here in the United States. So I do believe that the technology is definitely exportable.
And I understand that the ambassador's residence right here in Washington is one of the greenest buildings in the area. Maybe you could describe that for us.
It is built according to energy efficient standards. And that was a point, that was a statement we wanted to make when we built it about 5 years ago. And it is true. It probably is one of the more energy efficient ones in the Washington area.